It started like any other weekday afternoon in the quiet suburbs outside Fort Dillon. Kids running off the school bus, the smell of fresh-cut grass, the low hum of distant traffic. David "Reaper" Stone was in his garage, polishing his Harley, when his phone rang. 3:47 p.m. The moment his life split in two. On the other end, his ex-wife Rachel was screaming. Lily never came home, she cried, words tumbling through sobs. The bus driver said she got off at our stop. But she never made it to the house. For a second, David froze, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. Then every muscle in his body turned to stone. The walk from the bus stop to Rachel's front porch was barely 300 feet. How could she vanish between there and home? David didn't wait for the police. He called his brothers. Within minutes, 40 engines roared to life, a sound like thunder rolling out of hell. The steel demons were on the move. Rachel Street was chaotic when David arrived. Neighbors peered through curtains, mothers clutched their kids tighter. David tore through the yard, scanning every inch, until he saw Lily's backpack half buried in the bushes. Her lunchbox was still inside, untouched. But the teddy bear she never went anywhere without Mr. Buttons were missing. That's when Snake, the club's tech man, glanced at his phone and said, "She's moving." David turned sharply. "What do you mean, moving?" "The tracker," Snake said, holding up the screen. "You told me to sew one inside the bear, just in case. She's on the move, north on Highway 9. David's blood turned to ice. He knew exactly whose turf that was. Carlos El Lobo Mendez, the cartel lieutenant pushing meth through their county. The same man David had refused to do business with last month when Carlos tried to use the bike shop for drug smuggling. "This isn't a kidnapping," Tank muttered. "This is a message." David clenched his fists so tight his knuckles went white. The club looked to him for orders. He didn't yell. He didn't rage. He just said one thing. "Find him." Snake kept the tracker on screen as they rode north. The blinking dot moved fast, about 40 miles ahead, straight toward a stretch of warehouses near the old industrial park. Then David's phone rang again. Unknown number. He answered. "Missing something, Reaper." The voice was smug, thick with a Spanish accent. "Carlos. If you hurt her, I'll burn your entire world down," David said, voice low and deadly calm. Carlos laughed. "You threaten my business. Now I threaten your family. Bring me $100,000 and sign your shop over to me, or little Lily disappears forever." David's eyes hardened. "I'll bring your money," he said evenly. "Where?" "The old warehouse on Miller Road. Midnight. Come alone, or she dies." Carlos hung up. David didn't speak for a long time. The roar of bikes filled the silence. Then he looked up and said, "He thinks I'm coming alone." Tank nodded grimly. "So we let him think that." The steel demons began to move like a military unit, split into teams, routes, and roles. Every man knew what was at stake. But even as they planned, David's heart stayed on that empty street, the one where his little girl should have walked safely home. And somewhere out there, that teddy bear kept moving. A blinking dot on a phone screen. And the promise of vengeance in the eyes of every biker who saw it. Night settled over the county like a heavy shroud. Every streetlight, every backroad, seemed to hum with tension. In the Steel Demons clubhouse, the air was thick not with fear, but with resolve. Maps covered the pool table, the blinking tracker sat at the center like a heartbeat. "Warehouse on Miller Road," Tank growled, tracing the route with a scarred finger. 15, maybe 20 men. Heavy weapons. "If we go in loud, they'll kill her before we reach her." "We won't go in loud," David replied. "Not until we have to." Every man leaned in. He was their president, their brother, and tonight, their war leader. The plan was precise, every role clear. David would ride alone to the meet, make Carlos believe he'd surrendered. The rest would move quietly on the flanks, tracking the signal from Mr. Buttons. Snake adjusted his headset. The bears stopped moving. Building 20 meters north of the warehouse. That's where she is. David nodded once. Then that's where we end it. Just as they were about to mount up, headlights appeared at the gate. An unmarked sedan rolled to a stop. Every gun in the room raised instantly. Hold it. The tank barked. Out stepped a man in plain clothes, hands raised. Detective Tom Miller. The same cop who chased the steel demons for years. I'm not here as a cop, he said, his voice steady. I'm here because Carlos killed my partner. Made it look like suicide. I've spent 2 years trying to put him away, but the system, it protects him. Do you want him? I can help you find him. Nobody moved. Tank sneered. Why should we trust you? Miller reached into his jacket slowly and pulled out a folder of photographs. Because he's not just holding your girl. He's got 14 other kids in that building. He's starting a trafficking ring. The room exploded in curses and fury. Fists slammed tables. One man punched a wall so hard his knuckles bled. David stood frozen, his chest tightening. This wasn't just about his daughter anymore. How do you know this? David asked quietly. Miller's eyes darkened. Because I tried to save them once. The judge threw out the evidence. You think the cops will stop him now? They won't. But maybe you can. David stared at the photos of scared faces, bruised arms, broken eyes. Then we do it our way, he said. The room fell silent, and every man nodded. No one needed to be told twice. The plan changed. They would still draw Carlos out at the warehouse, but now 2 rescue teams would hit the building nearby at the same time. Precision. Speed. No hesitation. As they rolled out, the night came alive with the low thunder of engines. From 3 different states, allies answered the call. Patches from other clubs, the Outlaws, the Widow's Sons, the Iron Wolves, all arrived under one flag. For the first time in years, every rivalry vanished. This ain't about colors tonight, Tank said into his radio. It's about the kids. The convoy stretched for miles, engines rumbling like distant thunderclouds. Men rode with grim faces, headlights slicing through the darkness. Meanwhile, Carlos waited inside the warehouse, surrounded by gunmen. He checked his watch, smirked, and said, "He'll come. They always do." At 11:58, a single headlight appeared on the horizon. David, alone, as promised. His leather cut gleamed under the dim light, the word "Steel Demons President" stitched across the back. Inside, Carlos smiled. There's our fool. What Carlos didn't know, was that at that very moment, 200 bikers were circling his empire like wolves, waiting for a single word to strike. The warehouse district was silent except for the low growl of engines idling in the distance. Inside, Carlos El Lobo Mendez leaned against a table piled with cash and rifles, confident, smirking. His men watched the doors, weapons ready. The clock hit midnight. A single headlight cut through the darkness. David Reaper Stone rode straight into the lion's den, dust swirling around him like smoke. He dismounted slowly, his boots echoing against the concrete. No fear. No hesitation. Just a father walking into hell. Carlos stepped out of the shadows, arms open like a showman greeting a guest. Where's my money, Reaper? David didn't blink. Where's my daughter? Carlos grinned. Safe, for now. You came alone. Good. I thought the president of the Steel Demons had more sense, but maybe you really are just a desperate old man. David's voice was calm, almost too calm. Are you done talking? Carlos smirked. You got some nerve. Then it happened. A low rumble rolled across the horizon. The ground trembled. Carlos frowned. "What's that noise?" David tilted his head, eyes cold as steel. "You asked if I came alone." The sound grew louder. Engines, hundreds of them. Out of the night came 200 bikers, headlights blazing like an oncoming storm. Every club patch glinted in the dark. They surrounded the compound in a full circle of vengeance and chrome. Carlos's smirk vanished. "You brought an army, to a business negotiation." "This isn't business," David said. "You took my daughter. You took other people's kids. You made it personal." Carlos shouted orders. Gunfire erupted. The steel demons charged. The night exploded with chaos, muzzle flashes, the roar of engines, fists, steel, fury. It was fast, brutal, efficient. The bikers fought like ghosts, in and out, silent, coordinated, ruthless. While Carlos's men fell one by one, Snake and Tank led the rescue team to the smaller building just north of the main warehouse. Inside, they found a locked door, reinforced steel. Tank raised his shotgun and blew the hinges clean off. Behind it, 14 terrified children huddled together. Ages 6 to 12. Some were crying, some too scared to make a sound. And there, in the corner, clutching her teddy bear with both hands, was Lily. Tank knelt down, his voice gentle for the first time that night. "Hey, sweetheart. Daddy's friends are here. You're safe now." The radio crackled. "Reaper, we got them. All of them. They're safe." David closed his eyes for a second, just 1 second, and exhaled a breath he'd been holding for hours. But the war wasn't over. Carlos was running. He bolted out the back of the warehouse, bleeding and terrified. But David was already there, waiting. He tackled Carlos to the ground, dragging him inside another empty building. No brothers, no witnesses. Just the two of them. "Please," Carlos gasped. "You can have my money. I didn't hurt her. She's alive." David stared down at him, his voice low and steady. "You were going to sell her." Carlos's silence was all the confirmation he needed. What happened in that building, no one ever knew. But the screams echoed for an hour. When David finally stepped out, Carlos was still alive, barely. Broken, beaten, paralyzed. His empire ended with a whisper. David called Tank. "Tell the cops we found the kids. Tell them to come pick up what's left." When law enforcement arrived, they didn't find a gang war. They found 15 children rescued, 30 cartel soldiers tied up and beaten, and Carlos Mendez confessing to crimes they hadn't even known about. Drug routes. Murders. Bribes. Trafficking. He begged for protective custody. Detective Miller walked up to David, his expression unreadable. "What did you do to him?" David looked out toward the flashing lights, the children being carried to safety. "I showed him what fathers do to men who hurt children." Months passed. The evidence from that night took down half of Carlos's network. He was sentenced to life without parole. In prison, word spread about what he'd done to those kids. 2 weeks later, another inmate, a father of 3, found him alone in the showers. Carlos survived, but he never walked again. Lily recovered slowly. The nightmares came for months, but every night, one of the steel demons stood guard outside Rachel's house. Every night until the bad dreams stopped. The 14 other children were reunited with their families. Each one, adopted by a motorcycle club that promised to protect them for life. One boy's parents had been killed by Carlos. The steel demons took him in as one of their own. Detective Miller resigned from the force. He became a private investigator, helping families find missing kids, the ones the system forgot. And the steel demons changed too. They stopped being just a motorcycle club. They became guardians and protectors of their community. Any rumor of a missing child, any dealer pushing near a school, they were there before the police ever got the call. Sometimes legally. Sometimes not. Always effectively. The warehouse where Carlos once kept those children was torn down. The bikers built a playground there instead, bright, open, free. On weekends, you can see kids laughing, swinging, chasing each other in the sunlight. The sound of engines hums softly in the distance, a reminder that someone's always watching. Lily still keeps Mr. Buttons close. The tracker's still inside, but now there's a little red button too, a panic switch her father added. Rachel asked, just in case. David smiled faintly. Never again. Every year, on the anniversary of the kidnapping, a letter is sent to Carlos's cell. Inside, a photo Lily, older, smiling, surrounded by 200 leather-clad guardians. The message on the back always says the same thing. She survived. You won't. Prison guards say Carlos cries every time, begging for an end that never comes. Lily is 13 now. She doesn't remember much about that day, really. But she knows one thing, she's protected. In 5 years, the Steel Demons have saved 87 children. Not all stories end happily, but they all end with justice. Carlos once had an empire, money, soldiers, power. He thought that made him untouchable. He was wrong. Because when you take a biker's daughter, nothing can save you. The sun rose quietly over Fort Dillon that morning, the first sunrise in months that felt peaceful. The streets were calm, the playground full of laughter. But beneath that peace, something permanent had changed. The Steel Demons were no longer just a name whispered with fear. They had become a symbol of protection, of justice, of a code that the law couldn't always deliver. People who once crossed the street to avoid them now waved when they rode by. Mothers smiled. Fathers nodded in gratitude. The news called it a miracle rescue. Reporters used words like vigilante justice and underground network. But to those who were there, to the kids, the parents, and the bikers, it wasn't about revenge or reputation. It was about restoring something simple, something sacred. The right for a child to walk home safely. Lily still plays at the park built on the ruins of that warehouse. The same ground where she once cried now rings with the sound of laughter and spinning wheels. Every bench has a brass plate, engraved with the name of a rescued child. Every spring, the community gathers their bikers, families, even former cops for a memorial ride. Not for grief, but gratitude. David rides at the front, as always. Gray now streaks his beard, but his eyes are still sharp, steady. Lily rides behind him on a smaller bike, a leather vest custom-made with her own patched steel angels. The next generation, growing under protection, not fear. After the ride, David always stops by the playground fence. He takes off his gloves, looks around at the families, the children, the life that came from that terrible night, and whispers, "This is why." Detective Tom Miller stands beside him sometimes. He doesn't wear a badge anymore, just an old denim jacket and tired eyes that have finally found peace. He tells David about the cases he's still working on, the families he's helped. "Can't save them all," he says quietly. David nods. "No. But we save the ones we can." In the years that followed, other clubs across the country started doing the same. They called it Guardian Rides. Every city had one. Bikers volunteering to patrol neighborhoods, raise awareness, and support missing children's foundations. Some worked with the police, some didn't. But the message was clear: the streets belong to protectors, not predators. Carlos El Lobo Mendez never walked again. Paralyzed, broken, and forgotten, he spent his days locked in a high-security wing, the same one that held men who once feared his name. Every year, he got that photo. Lily is smiling, growing, living. Every year, it destroyed him a little more. Prison guard said he often muttered the same phrase over and over. The bear, it had a tracker. To the world, the story of the Steel Demons was a legend, the tale of bikers who took on a cartel and won. But to David, it was never about legend. It was about Lily. About the kids they saved. About the ones they couldn't. He never spoke of what happened in that warehouse the hour that turned a man into a ghost. But sometimes, when he sat around the clubhouse fire late at night, and a younger member asked him quietly what justice really meant, he would stare into the flames and say, "Justice isn't a word. It's a choice. It's what you do when the system turns away." Then he'd raise his glass, the firelight flickering off the patches of his brothers, and they'd all drink not for vengeance, but for peace earned the hard way. The Steel Demons had once been feared. Now they were followed, respected, even thanked. But they never forgot what it took to earn that redemption. Every time an amber light flickered on a dashboard, every time a father's heart skipped a beat because his kid was late getting home, they remembered. Because the world is full of monsters. And not all of them hide in the dark. But as long as there are men willing to stand between innocent and evil men like David, like Miller, like the Steel Demons, those monsters will never sleep easy again. Years passed. Time softened the edges of what happened that night, but it never erased it. The story of the Steel Demons became more than a tale whispered at bars or replayed on late-night documentaries. It became a warning, and a promise. Across the highways of America, you could see it: black leather, chrome, and thunder. But if you looked closer, the patches told a new story. Guardian riders. Angels of asphalt. Children first. Clubs that once fought each other now rode side by side under one creed: protect what's innocent. The ripple from one man's choice, one father's fury had become a wave of quiet defenders rolling through forgotten towns. In some cities, dealers vanished overnight. In others, trafficking rings suddenly stopped operating. Police reports called it coincidence. Locals called it something else: biker justice. No one ever proved it, but everyone knew who it was. David Reaper Stone had grown older. His hands weren't as steady on the throttle, but his heart never wavered. He'd traded vengeance for vigilance, still watching, still protecting. Every year, on the anniversary of Lily's kidnapping, he visited the playground. By now, it wasn't just a park. It had become a sanctuary. A stone wall at the entrance bore a plaque that read, "For the ones we saved, and for the ones we still ride for." The laughter of children filled the air, a sound more powerful than any roar of engines. Lily, now a young woman, would walk beside her father during those visits. She always carried Mr. Buttons. The fur was faded, one ear missing, but the tiny tracker inside still blinked, just like it did that day. Only now, it wasn't about safety, it was about memory. One afternoon, she asked softly, "Dad, what really happened in that warehouse?" David paused for a long time. He looked out toward the horizon, the same way he had years ago when he rode into fire for her. Then he said, "Some things don't belong in words, baby. They belong in lessons." She smiled faintly, understanding more than he expected. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "The world will always have darkness. But as long as someone's willing to ride into it, we'll be okay." Detective Tom Miller visited from time to time. He'd aged too, though the years had softened his bitterness. He and David would share coffee by the bikes, watching kids run by. "You ever think the world will change?" Miller asked one day. David chuckled. "The world doesn't change. People do. One choice at a time." They watched as a young boy, maybe 8, the same age Lily had, climbed to the top of the slide and threw his arms up in triumph. "That's enough change for me," Miller said. "But even peace has echoes." Once a year, on that same night, somewhere in a distant prison, a guard